Key problem factors. The core security problem faced by web applications arises in any situation where an application must accept and process untrusted data that may be malicious. However, in the case of web applications, there are several factors which have combined to exacerbate the problem, and which explain why so many web applications on the Internet today do such a poor job of addressing it. Immature security awareness. There is a less mature level of awareness of web application security issues than there is in longer established areas such as networks and operating systems. While most people working in IT security have a reasonable grasp of the essentials of securing networks and hardening hosts, there is still widespread confusion and misconception about many of the core concepts involved in web application security. It is common to meet experienced web application developers to whom an explanation of many basic types of flaws comes as a complete revelation. In-house development. Most web applications are developed in-house by an organization's own staff or contractors. Even where an application employs third-party components, these are typically customized or bolted together using new code. In this situation, every application is different and may contain its own unique defects. This stands in contrast to a typical infrastructure deployment in which an organization can purchase a best-of-breed product and install it in line with industry standard guidelines. Deceptive simplicity. With today's web application platforms and development tools, it is possible for a novice programmer to create a powerful application from scratch in a short period of time. But there is a huge difference between producing code that is functional and code that is secure. Many web applications are created by well-meaning individuals who simply lack the knowledge and experience to identify where security problems may arise. Rapidly evolving threat profile. As a result of its relative immaturity, research into web application attacks and defenses is a thriving area in which new concepts and threats are conceived at a faster rate than is now the case for older technologies. A development team that begins a project with a complete knowledge of current threats may well have lost this status by the time the application is completed and deployed. Resource and time constraints. Most web application development projects are subject to strict constraints on time and resources, arising from the economics of in-house, one-off development. It is not usually possible to employ dedicated security expertise in the design or development teams, and due to project slippage, security testing by specialists is often left until very late in the project's life cycle. In the balancing of competing priorities, the need to produce a stable and functional application by a deadline normally overrides less tangible security considerations. A typical small organization may be willing to pay for only a few man-days of consulting time to evaluate a new application. A quick penetration test will often find the low-hanging fruit, but it may miss more subtle vulnerabilities that require time and patience to identify. Overextended technologies. Many of the core technologies employed in web applications began life when the landscape of the World Wide Web was very different, and have since been pushed far beyond the purposes for which they were originally conceived. For example, the use of JavaScript as a means of data transmission in many AJAX-based applications. As the expectations placed on web application functionality have rapidly evolved, the technologies used to implement this functionality have lagged behind the curve, with old technologies stretched and adapted to meet new requirements. Unsurprisingly, this has led to security vulnerabilities as unforeseen side effects emerge. The new security perimeter. Before the rise of web applications, organizations' efforts to secure themselves against external attack were largely focused on the network perimeter. Defending this perimeter entailed hardening and patching the services that it needed to expose, and firewalling access to others. Web applications have changed all of this. For an application to be accessible by its users, the perimeter firewall must allow inbound connections to the server over HTTP/S. And for the application to function, the server must be allowed to connect to supporting back-end systems, such as databases, mainframes, and financial and logistical systems. These systems often lie at the core of the organization's operations and reside behind several layers of network-level defenses. If a vulnerability exists within a web application, then an attacker on the public internet may be able to compromise the organization's core back-end system solely by submitting crafted data from his web browser. This data will sail past all of the organization's network defenses, in just the same way as does ordinary, benign traffic to the web application. The effect of widespread deployment of web applications is that the security perimeter of a typical organization has moved. Part of that perimeter is still embodied in firewalls and bastion hosts. But a significant part of it is now occupied by the organization's web applications. Because of the manifold ways in which web applications receive user input and pass this to sensitive back-end systems, they are the potential gateways for a wide range of attacks, and defenses against these attacks must be implemented within the applications themselves. A single line of defective code in a single web application can render an organization's internal systems vulnerable. The statistics described previously, of the incidence of vulnerabilities within this new security perimeter, should give every organization pause for thought. Note: for an attacker targeting an organization, gaining access to the network or executing arbitrary commands on servers may well not be what they really want to achieve. Often, and perhaps typically, what an attacker really desires is to perform some application-level action such as stealing personal information, transferring funds, or making cheap purchases. And the relocation of the security perimeter to the application layer may greatly assist an attacker in achieving these objectives. For example, suppose that an attacker wishes to hack into a bank's systems and steal money from users' accounts. Before the bank deployed a web application, the attacker might have needed to find a vulnerability in a publicly reachable service, exploit this to gain a toehold on the bank's DMZ, penetrate the firewall restricting access to its internal systems, map the network to find the mainframe computer, decipher the arcane protocol used to access it, and then guess some credentials in order to log in. However, if the bank deploys a vulnerable web application, then the attacker may be able to achieve the same outcome simply by modifying an account number in a hidden field of an HTML form. A second way in which web applications have moved the security perimeter arises from the threats that users themselves face when they access a vulnerable application. A malicious attacker can leverage a benign but vulnerable web application to attack any user who visits it. If that user is located on an internal corporate network, the attacker may harness the user's browser to launch an attack against the local network from the user's trusted position. Without any cooperation from the user, the attacker may be able to carry out any action that the user could perform if she were herself malicious. Network administrators are familiar with the idea of preventing their users from visiting malicious websites, and end users themselves are gradually becoming more aware of this threat. But the nature of web application vulnerabilities means that a vulnerable application may present no less of a threat to its users and their organization than a website that is overtly malicious. Correspondingly, the new security perimeter imposes a duty of care on all application owners to protect their users from attacks against them delivered via the application. The future of web application security. Several years after their widespread adoption, web applications on the Internet today are still rife with vulnerabilities. Understanding of the security threats facing web applications, and effective ways of addressing these, remains immature within the industry. There is currently little indication that the problem factors described previously are going to go away in the near future. That said, the details of the web application security landscape are not static. While old and well-understood vulnerabilities like SQL injection continue to appear, their prevalence is gradually diminishing. Further, the instances that remain are becoming more difficult to find and exploit. Much current research is focused on developing advanced techniques for attacking more subtle manifestations of vulnerabilities which a few years ago could be easily detected and exploited using only a browser. A second prominent trend is a gradual shift in attention from traditional attacks against the server side of the application to those that target other users. The latter kind of attack still leverages defects within the application itself, but it generally involves some kind of interaction with another user, to compromise that user's dealings with the vulnerable application. This is a trend that has been replicated in other areas of software security. As awareness of security threats matures, flaws in the server side are the first to be well understood and addressed, leaving the client side as a key battleground as the learning process continues. Of all the attacks described in this book, those against other users are evolving the most quickly, and are the focus of most current research. Note: in a few short years, the World Wide Web has evolved from purely static information repositories into highly functional applications that process sensitive data and perform powerful actions with real-world consequences. During this development, several factors have combined to bring about the weak security posture demonstrated by the majority of today's web applications. Most applications face the core security problem that users can submit arbitrary input. Every aspect of the user's interaction with the application may be malicious and should be regarded as such unless proven otherwise. Failure to properly address this problem can leave applications vulnerable to attack in numerous ways. All of the evidence about the current state of web application security indicates that this problem has not been resolved on any significant scale, and that attacks against web applications present a serious threat both to the organizations that deploy them and to the users who access them.